through some stuff, so it was good to catch up with him. So
It's nice to be there for somebody when they need it, though.
yeah, and I'm not bragging on myself, but for some reason God's kind of given me that gift, so I feel like I'm that guy to a lot of people, but at the same time I need guys in my life that I can kind of reverse the roles with, you know what I mean? And I'm
Right.
and I'm thankful that I've got a lot of solid dudes in my life that I can do that with too.
Yeah, you can't take those guys for granted either, because man, just when you just when you think you need help, that clutch friend comes up big for you and is there for you when you need it most. That's happened to me quite a few times over the past month or two. It's like the people that are involved in my life regularly are really, holding up their end of the bargain and being there for somebody that needs help, or vice versa, because I want to be that guy too, which I think I am. So,
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be. I mean, sometimes it's a hour conversation that gets really deep, and other times it's just a text message, and it's like, man, it,
yeah.
it makes all the difference in the world for the outcome of your day.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've said this on here a time or two, but I cold call a lot of my people just to check on them,
Yeah.
because I mean I miss so many messages throughout the day. If it's a text message or a DM or something, it's hard for me to keep up with them at times. So especially when I'm driving, if I'm driving, man, I just like, oh, what's Chris doing, or what's Logan doing, or somebody. I'll call somebody if I haven't talked to him in a month or so and just check on them, man.
No, and I like that. I mean, I think we've gotten so we're almost a slave to our phones, and it's like, okay, I'm going to give Tyler a call. I better send him a text first, and it's like
Right.
it's just kind of the what you default to. But it's nice to just get those random calls. And at first, when it first started happening, I'm like, that was kind of rude. We didn't have an appointment, but it's like, what? At what point did our thinking get to that? Pre
Yes.
cell phones, it was like, I'm just going to go and just grab this phone off the wall of my house and call my friend.
Right.
A totally foreign concept to especially the younger generation that grew up with a cell phone when they came out of the womb.
Yeah, and it's never the right time too, because you know how it is. It'd be like, oh, I'm free here at this time, and it's like, well, screw that. I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm just gonna cold call it, and if I get a hold of you, great. If not, then we'll set something up. But sometimes it's pretty beneficial. I like it.
No, and thank you for being one of those guys, because I most, and I don't know if it's just being in business that it's like, okay, yeah, I'm free. What's it look like for you next week? Well, I've got these times and dates open, but it's nice to just get those random phone calls, and there's nothing that I do in the flow of a given day that's that important that I can't take a call from you.
Yes,
You
I
know what I mean?
agree. I
It's
agree.
like, well, my 50th thing on my post-it note can probably wait 20 minutes while I talk to my good friend Tyler.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. How's things been? I'm glad we got to set this up.
No, I am too. It's good. It's been a trying year. I mean, the archery industry as a whole is down. Um, our country is a mess. That's a whole nother
I
podcast.
could not agree more.
And I just, normally archery is pretty resistant to any kind of economical tornadoes that we're under. But I really feel like for the first time, maybe in our history, that archery is getting impacted just by the mess that is our country right now. People still have disposable income, but it's not what it once was when you're talking crazy high interest rates, and people are
Yes.
still getting out and hunting and spending money on archery accessories. But we have definitely felt, our industry as a whole is off significantly this year, and thankfully we're still kind of on the top of the heap from what I've heard and what I understand. But it hasn't been a great year for archery. I'm hoping that things will hopefully turn around in 2024, but we'll see. All I know is we're going into our 40th year in business, and we want to be here for 40 more. So
I want you guys around for 40 more. What are
yeah.
what are the busiest months? This might be a dumb question, but what are the busiest months for you guys? Like right before season or what?
Typically, yeah. So August, September are pretty crazy because I mean that's when really the rubber meets the road, and especially the western states. I mean, a lot of those they're kicking off their hunting seasons already. But for the Midwest and the East, that's when the bulk of folks are really getting ready. But then we almost have. I mean, I think back 15, 20 years ago, it was August, September. I mean, you lived for July, August, September, but now we almost have two busy seasons with the launch of the new flagship bows in November. Some of them even as early as October. There's a secondary busy season that's like January, February, March. So
That
your
makes
your
sense.
hardcore guys that are going to buy the new Matthews, they're going to buy the new Hoyt, whatever, every year. They're gonna start coming into the archery shops in as early as November, December, and putting their names on those bows, and then when they buy them and pick them up, then they got to put new sights on them. So we have it's nice that it's not just so crazy. It was almost like Christmas, July, August, September. It used to be, Santa would build the toys for 9 months, living for those 3, but now we're able to almost split that into two busy seasons, and it's not so crazy in the summer anymore.
Yeah. Starting at my own business here over this past year has been quite the journey. And to hear you say, we've been in business for 40 years and we want to be in business for 40 more. I just think that that's so cool that you guys have been doing this thing for such a long time. How did that all come about? I know the majority of your background, Chris, but maybe a lot of the listeners don't. But you do have a great story. One of the pieces that I love, that this job that you're doing right now is basically the only job that you've ever had, technically, if I remember correctly, which I just think is outstanding. Can you just kind of touch on what it's been like with HHA and trials and tribulations? Just because, man, I'm trying to build something as well. I don't know if it'll ever get to the caliber that you guys are at, but hey, we can sure as heck try, and it's a great standard that you've set. So I'd like to have you explain a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
For sure. Yeah. And first off, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, it's one thing that I tell people is, and I don't think this is a Chris Hammism, but maybe it is, but we're learning every day. And I say that the day that I get up out of bed and I don't learn something, it's time to get a new bed. I mean, yeah, we've been doing this for 40 years, but you're always learning something new. And so just to backtrack on our history, my late father started HHA Sports back in 1984. So I was 9 years old at the time. I'm 48 right now. And it literally is the only job that I've ever had. He started it in the basement of a 1,200-foot ranch house in a subdivision in central Wisconsin. And we just 2 months ago finally moved into a commercial building, but we had been in 3 different residences, all within about, as a crow flies, probably a 3-mile square area here in central Wisconsin.
Man, unbelievable. 1984, man. How cool.
Yeah, that was Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, and Indiana Jones, and no cell phones, no such thing as a website. I mean, it's crazy. And I think I've just been, I hate using the word busy because everybody's like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm busy. Well, we're all busy.
Yes.
But I just haven't given myself the permission to really sit back a whole lot. I'm starting to do a better job of that and just kind of look at our history. And we just did, for your listeners that are interested in kind of checking out more and diving deeper into the HHA Sports story, we did a series and put it up on our YouTube channel this winter called The First 40. And it was a 6-part video series that we just kind of unpacked different aspects and parts of HHA Sports, our product line, kind of where we've been, where we're going, what we stand for. And that was really fun to do that. It was kind of a passion project, something I'd been wanting to do for a long time, because I've told this story hundreds of times, but it's cool to get it out there and put a visual on it and have it, basically preserved forever out on the internet.
Yeah. No, very cool. Very cool. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people I've tried. Out west is a little bit different. I don't see as many HHA sites on the western side of the country as I do, like, if I were to be back home, more whitetail hunters type things with single pins especially. But you guys have solved that problem as well. But I can't tell you how many people I've recommended, to go check out the Tetra, or just guys that I've put in contact with you. And every single person that buys one of your sites just absolutely falls in love with them. So you guys have been the number one single pin for 2 decades?
Yeah, we're in fact, thank you for the reminder. We've 19 years straight. We're hoping to make that 20. So I love round numbers. So it'd be really cool to be able to celebrate 20 years and a 40th anniversary. That just has a good ring to it. 2040. It's kind of like, the 40-40 guy in baseball. So
yeah, that's not a bad gig at all. So where did this idea come from then?
So my dad was an archer.
Just love archery or what?
Yeah, he had he picked up archery, pre-compound. So you're talking late 1960s. He started shooting, wooden arrows in his garage, and went to a local archery club, and the fire just kind of got lit from there. So, and then he was around, when the compound bows came out, and everybody thought that they were like something out of outer space, and he for a living, he was in manufacturing, so he had various supervisory jobs within manufacturing, but he was a tinkerer as well. He had a business management degree, but he loved to design stuff in the basement, so he just started making his own archery products. And he had a release back in the late 1970s that he sold just a few of, basically out of the basement of the house, and it never went anywhere. And it took him basically another 5 years to kind of get HHA Sports formed. And a lot of people, common question we get is, what does HHA Sports stand for? And my father's name was Harold Hamm, so it's Harry Hamm and Associates is what HHA stands for.
That's so cool. I never knew that.
Kind of a cool trivia question to throw out there to your hunting buddies. Hey, what does HHA stand for? Because people are like, well, the few people that do know about my dad, they're like, well, it's Harry Hamm Archery. And it's like, no, it's not. It's Harold Hamm and Associates. So.
And everybody else. I love that.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for longevity in a business, being an entrepreneur and running a company like this?
Man, I would say, I just look back, like I said, we started, way pre-internet, pre-email blast, pre-social media, all that stuff. You've got to have kind of a moral code or some ethical standards that you're going to operate by, because if you don't have that, you don't really have a solid foundation. Because if you're not a good person, if you don't, operate above table, if you don't take care of people, I don't care what you're selling, if it's a product or service, you're not going to have sustainability. So just being authentic and having that good moral code. One of the things that my dad ingrained in us from day one was customer service. We're going to build an American-made product at a fair price that we're going to stand behind. And back in 1991, 92, that was when the caliper release craze really took off. So we started making caliper releases, and they were, I think retail on them was about $40, but they were like $16 to the dealer. And we tried to do everything as good as we possibly can as far as manufacturing, but there were times that, products are just going to fail. And customer would call up and, hey, I've got one of these that's, misfiring on me. And, or a dealer would call with the same question. And I'll never forget this. My dad would be like, just throw it in the garbage. We'll get another one to you in the mail tomorrow. And 2 days later, the guy had a replacement sitting there. And so that kind of customer service really laid the foundation for what we are now seeing and, winning that award for 20 years in a row, is because that's not anything new that we did. That started in 1984, was building a quality product and standing behind it. It just took us a while to hit the home run with the Optimizer in the mid-90s that's now turned into the Tetra.
And that's been the thing, Chris, that I've noticed the most when just meeting people from different companies and or brands, or buying a product and maybe something goes wrong with it, and you try to contact somebody at the storefront or just the number for customer service that they give you online, and it is so rare to have good customer service nowadays in basically anything, that when you get it, it's tenfold. It stands out significantly. It'll make your whole day. At least it makes mine. If I get good customer service from any company, I really remember that, because it seems like I'm not getting that hardly at all on like a day-to-day basis through anybody. So when you get it and it's good, I remember it personally. Like, that goes a long way with me.
Well, and if the way I put it is, if you have a good experience, or if you give somebody a good experience, you're going to probably tell 10 of your buddies.
Yes.
If you have a bad one, you're probably going to tell 100.
Very true.
And so, that you only get one chance to make a first impression. And that's huge. That initial moment, yes, that I get a good product. Oh, unfortunately something happened to it, but I had a email response back in 2 minutes, or somebody picked up the phone on the other end, and it wasn't a, press 1 for this, press 5 for this. You get a live human being that's friendly, that's sympathetic to your situation. And, hey, Tyler, sorry that happened. Give me your address. We'll get you taken care of. That's huge. That has bought us more business over the years than anything else, is just taking care of people.
And you're leading from the front. And I say that because I've seen it firsthand. I cold emailed you probably at this point 3-4 years ago. I wanted to raise money for a good foundation that I believed in, and I got recommended, HHA USA. So I emailed you, and we've talked about this on your show, the HHA USA podcast, before. But I mean, I emailed you and you responded back like within an hour and or two. And then when you did and we jumped on a call, it had felt like you and I had known each other for 10 plus years. And, you know, you're in your 40s, I'm almost 30. So there is an age difference here. But I mean, it's not necessarily customer service, how you handled it, but just you being yourself, polite, you know, interested in my idea, you know, the relationship that we formed. That's your whole brand. And I'm sure that trickles down from Chris Hamm throughout the company, the way that you carry yourself.
Yeah, I think it does. And I mean, my dad was that way. He was a personable guy. He could talk your ear off, and I'm the same way. And I mean, I I love people, and it's very rarely that I butt heads with anybody. And if I do and have to, unfortunately, remove somebody from my life, not that I'm a perfect person, but more often than not, that guy probably stepped in it pretty big to get defriended from Chris Hamm. You know what I mean? And I'm not bragging when I say that, but I can get along with just about anybody. And I think in order to be successful in life and in business, you have to have that mentality. Not that we don't, occasionally have our guards up around certain individuals, and there's that trust factor that has to be earned over time to have deep relationships. But when you're running a business, you have to be cordial. You have to be welcoming. I mean, I think of some organizations and businesses around here where you go in the door and it's like, man, why do they even have the on sign on? They don't want me here. Why am I coming back?
Right. Yeah. Well, I know I want to jump into the HHA USA stuff and the nonprofit that you have. But before that, I know a little bit about your background and how do I put this? You've transformed over a time period. There's been some significant things that have happened throughout your life, and you've made changes along the way. And I don't know exactly how long you've been sober for, but the Chris Hamm that I'm talking to now wasn't always, this Chris Hamm, if that makes sense. Like there was a previous version of you that, you didn't necessarily like about yourself that you ended up fixing. And I've heard bits and pieces through different shows that you've been on and that we've actually been on together. But would you mind sharing a little bit about your story? And because if you know me at all, Chris, what you do in my show, I'm just trying to help anybody that I can. And I know that your story has and will continue to benefit a lot of people. And I just wouldn't mind if you would tell that on here to help benefit our people on the performance side of things, because it's a great story and it's very admirable what you've been able to do.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share it. So, and if this gets long-winded, so be it. But I think to have the full context of it, I kind of have to tell the whole story. So,
yes.
Like I said, Dad started our business in 1984. I graduated high school in 1993. So, I mean, we were 9 years in. We were still growing as a company, but I was going to go off and do the 4-year college thing with the hopes of coming back to work for Dad. Well, would have been the night before Thanksgiving, my first year of college. So I'm 3 months in. I'm cutting a rat apart in biology lab. And I'm looking at this rat and going, what in the world does this have to do with making bow and arrow products? Absolutely nothing. And I was commuting to college with a friend of mine at the time, so it was a half hour up the road, and that was my dad's alma mater. So I basically knew that I had no interest in going back second semester, but I was scared to tell Dad, hey, sorry, I don't want to go back to school. But I just, why waste my money? I was paying for my own college. My heart wasn't in it. I was kind of an introvert at the time. I was a different version of myself than the guy that you see here. So I went home, told Mom and Dad, yeah, college not for me. Dad's like, that's fine, but don't just think you're going to hang up your backpack and come to work tomorrow. I still want you to get some kind of formal education. So we had a tech college in town. I took off second semester. I went back in the fall of 94. Did 2 years there, business administration, and that I don't want to say I didn't learn a lot out of the books, but just what that did for Chris Hamm as a person, it really opened me up into the guy that I am today, or a part of that. It really got me to come out of my shell. I mean, there was people there that were 18, there was people there that were 50 that had lost their job, and they were going back for education to put more tools in their toolbox. And I had friends of all ages, and it really allowed me to come out of my shell. So that's probably the biggest takeaway that I got from college or from tech school, was it really got me turned me into Chris Hamm, the salesman and the good guy that I am today, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it very much does.
Yep. And I had one core teacher for both years that I was there. Kim Hansen, God rest her soul. She passed away before I had a chance to tell her how much she meant to me, but she sat me down the spring that we were getting ready to graduate. And I knew at that point, I was going to go to work for Dad. And she said, 5 years from now, where do you want to be? And I said, I want to buy a new truck. I want to build my own house. I want to make a bunch of money, and I want to get married. That was and I didn't even have a girlfriend at the time. So that was my plan. And I was a Post-it note guy, and I had all those things written on a Post-it note. And 5 years after that, I had accomplished all those things. And one of the big things that happened, so I graduated May of 96, November of 96, my dad had a near fatal heart attack. He was at the doctor getting his annual checkup, and had he not been there, he would have passed away that day. They wouldn't have, they had to rush him up the road half hour to another hospital that could take better care of him. But here I am, 21 years old, grooming to one day go into Dad's chair and sitting next to him on a hospital bed, not knowing if he's coming home. And that was a lot for a 21-year-old kid. And so at that point, then I essentially became the face of HHA Sports at any of the trade shows that we went to. I was the guy. Dad didn't go to the shows anymore. Our business really took off from there. And for probably 15 years of my life, I credited a lot of that success to me and to this persona of this great salesman that I had become. And a lot of that stuff involved excessive drinking with dealers, with other industry people, and staying out till all hours of the morning and probably doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing as a married man. And so my first marriage dissolved in 2010, and then I just completely went off the rails. A lot of drinking, a lot of partying, a lot of women. It was bad. It was bad, and I, by all accounts and purposes, I probably should have ended up in jail or in the ground. And by the grace of God, I'm still here. I think it was December 17th of 2011, I met an angel that absolutely changed my life. We've now been married 6 years, and that woman helped bring me back into a relationship with my Creator. And that is really, really what transformed me into the guy that you see today.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have, gone through dark periods in their life, like you had that stretch there. And a lot of people can't seem to get out of it. They don't have anybody to talk to. They don't know how to change. They're just stuck in a rut. And that is what it is, and it's very unfortunate. But when you get somebody like yourself that was able to get out of their rut, and you credit that to your wife, your current wife, and Jesus Christ, basically. Can you talk about the relationship that you formed with your wife when you met her? How did she get you back on the path? What really stood out about her that made you want to fight for not only yourself, but for her as well?
Well, and she's probably maybe she's not going to like the fact that I'm sharing this on here, but I know that this story is going to help somebody. So, I was all out. I was 36 years old when I met her, but I was acting like a 21-year-old college kid. Had I stayed in college, that I was partying like it was 1996 or 1993. And her and I dated on and off for 6 months, and I instantly knew that there was something about her. I didn't know what that was at first. Looking back on it now, I was essentially seeing Jesus through this woman. It was him living in her, and that was the draw. But I was in such a dark place that I didn't feel worthy of this woman, and so I kicked her away. And finally, when I realized what I had done, we had one more date where I basically pleaded for her to give me one more chance, and thank God that she did, because that was in September of 2012 that we got back together, and we've been together ever since. But it still took me another 3.5 years to come back to my faith. I mean, I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. I always believed in God, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And that for anybody that's a Christian, that's two completely different things. You know, saying, yeah, oh, yep, the man upstairs took care of me. Well, that's one thing, but actually having a personal relationship with Jesus is it's transformational. I did not have the power in my own strength to give up alcohol. I didn't. I could have gone to the 12 steps. I could have dumped all my booze out, but at the end of the day, we are all sinners. We all have weaknesses, and there's no strength within us to put that bottle down. And that's something that God just took away from me. And I'm so thankful that he did. I was 8 years sober this past June. I have no judgment against people that do drink. I know there's people that can drink socially and they can do it responsibly, but alcohol and Chris Hamm's DNA just did not mesh. I don't miss it. Now I'm a root beer guy. That's my jam. On Sunday nights, we have frozen pizza, and I have a stash of different kinds of root beer in my fridge that I always love traveling and finding new root beers. That's the first thing I'll ask on the menu. Do you have a local root beer that I can try? And I laugh about that, but I mean, it just, the clarity that I have about my life now, I mean, towards the end, I mean, it took me, and you're not there yet, but I mean, when I was 35, 36 years old, hangovers, a bad one, it would be 2.5 days. I mean, it sucked. It was not fun. And I don't know. I'm very, very thankful. And I didn't know this until about 6 months before we got married, but she told me that from the moment that we started dating, her and her parents were praying for my salvation. And I just about lost it when she told me that, and I still get emotional when I share that, because people that will question if there is a God and if prayer works, I could write a book. I want to write a book on 1,000 reasons why that is not true, because I've seen it time and time and time again in my life. And I tried to fill the hole in my soul with everything, with women, with alcohol, with money, with a big fancy house, with new vehicles. And all of that stuff is fleeting. And once you come into a relationship with Christ, it transforms you. I mean, that's why I'm doing HHA USA. I don't speak about that a lot. But I mean, I'm not a veteran. I never served our country. But God gave me a heart for that community. He gave me all of these blessings and these connections on the archery side. And now we're bringing the two of them together, and look at the lives that are being transformed. I never could have dreamed of this, Tyler, ever.
Yeah. I want to go backwards just really quick, and then we'll carry on. I really appreciate you sharing your story, but I want to ask you this. You mentioned that you didn't feel worthy of this woman in your life at the time, so you kind of kicked her away, and then, you know, later on down the road realized, hey, give me another chance. But initially, when you didn't feel worthy and you kind of pushed her away, do you feel like you were a victim to almost like self-sabotaging yourself at all? Like, just because I know when people are really struggling, and I've done this before, and when I was younger with things that I was going through, is you find a way just to mess it up. Like, you don't feel like you deserve good in your life, so you find a way to just blow up the scene on your own behalf, like almost self-sabotaging yourself in a way. Do you think that you were playing that game and not knowing it until you got to look back once you cleared your head and stuff?
100%. Because I mean, it was every Friday and Saturday night that I would be out, and then any other night during the week where I just felt like I needed to go and basically wash away my sorrows in a bottle. And I was like a dog chasing my tail for years. It was brutal. I remember at that time, you know, but before I knew Christ, just praying to God, you know, Lord, just get me out of this. I can't stay here. I can't sit in this. And I did a very good job hiding all of this from my family, from, you know, on the business side. I mean, I really didn't skip a beat. As far as people knew, everything was hunky-dory in Chris Hamm's life. And I mean, I'll never forget this. A lot of your readers out there that are archers are probably familiar with Bow Hunting World and Archery Business Magazine. That's who we've gotten our award from for 19 years running. So Archery Business is the trade side of that magazine that only goes to the dealers and the sales reps and manufacturers. And I was really good friends with the editor back in the day. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting in the Walmart parking lot getting ready to go in and grab some groceries, and my phone rang. and his name popped up on the screen, and he called me Hammer. That was his nickname for me. He's like, Hammer, what's going on today? And I'm like, you're finally going to put me on the cover of Archery Business, aren't you? And we had joked about that in years past, but there was a silence on the phone. He's like, how did you know? And I'm like, I don't know. Something just told me you're going to do it. And I wasn't happy about it because I was in the middle of that darkness. And they did. We had introduced, it was like 2012 or 2013, we had introduced what we called the Cadet. And it was a junior version of our single pin sight for youth and beginning archers. And it was really small, so it fit in the palm of your hand. And the photographer had me hold it out at arm's length. And it literally looked like I had the world in the palm of my hand with this hungover half smile on my face. I'll never forget that picture. And my mom thought it was the coolest thing in the world. They sent us like 200 copies. She saved one, and the rest of them I threw in the dumpster because I absolutely hated what that picture represented, because everybody thought that, I was on top of the world and they had no idea where I really was.
These podcasts are great because, we can talk about all different types of things. And as a listener, we both have our shows that we like listening to. And I think that's all fine and dandy. But in a lot of these shows, especially the good ones that we follow, there's really lessons to be learned, and there's lessons that you can apply to your own life. So it's what you do with the information or the topics discussed in these podcasts that really matter. And we can talk about this all darn day, but if somebody is really struggling, what advice do you have for them to implement a plan and get out of this dark hole? Because when you're deep into it, how you were, I'm sure there was a point in time like you just felt trapped. There's no way you're getting out of this. This is Chris Hamm's life. We're either going to go to jail or we're not going to see tomorrow. Well, obviously that wasn't the case, and that's not the case for a lot of these people that are listening if they are struggling with something. But how do you just get through it and start rehabilitating yourself? Because it's easy to talk about, but doing is the hard thing. How do you do this?
Yeah, I don't, back when I was right at the height of all of this darkness, or the depths of it, I guess, I didn't have the knowledge and the, I can't look back and go, oh man, yeah, I'm not 48-year-old Chris Hamm. I was 36-year-old Chris Hamm. But if a older version of myself could give the younger guy advice, I would say to make sure first and foremost that you surround yourself with a really, really solid group of people. It doesn't have to be 10 or 12. If you've got one or two people in your life that are going to go to battle for you and they're going to be there thick and thin, that is huge. And I had outside of family, I didn't really have anybody at that time that fit that bill. I had a lot of friends, and when I got my wallet out on a Friday or Saturday night, I had a lot of friends.
Yep.
But the minute that the bar closed and Chris Hamm went home, those friends went away.
Yeah.
And that was a lonely place. And I'm so thankful now for the depth of the quality of the friendships that I have, of people that they're not going to judge you regardless of what's going on. And they're just going to say, yeah, this sucks, Chris, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to wash it away with a bunch of alcohol or some other kind of substance that's going to make you forget about it for a day. And then you have to deal with it. And then the ramifications of doing that on top of it later.
I always enjoy our conversations, Chris. I know last time I was on your show a few months ago, I kind of explained the reason why I ended up quitting my job. If you remember, I kind of got that, that sign from God, and it was like, hey, are you going to listen to this? It was almost like a slap in the face. You remember the conversation. It's like, man, Tyler, if you don't listen to this, buddy, like, this one is completely 100% on you. This is there's only so many things that can add up until it's a coincidence. But eventually you're going to have to act on it. And it was hitting me so hard in the face where it's like, man, I have to listen to this sign. So I appreciate you sharing your testimony. And I really enjoyed getting to kind of share mine, at least with my career on your podcast. And you know how it is, man. If we can help one single person on, the HHA podcast or this one, we've won, Chris. And I think that's really all we're trying to do. And for some reason, whenever you and I talk, I feel like a lot of people benefit.
No, I do as well. That's no credit to me. That that is just Christ coming out through us. And I mean, there's so much importance in sharing our stories, as hard as they might be to share. I mean, I think about you. I think about all these veterans that I've met that we've done films on or done podcasts with. And, you know, it sounds cliche. I know this is a popular phrase now, but it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Hear it a lot. But the tough guy persona has to come down at some point, because everybody has bad days. Nobody lives a Instagram filtered perfect life. That's a joke.
Yeah.
100%. And there is so much healing that comes through open and raw and honest conversations. I mean, I think of just the fruit that's come from you and I knowing each other and some of these podcasts that we've had. And it's like, man, there are people's lives are just waiting to be changed if we will share our stories and share our testimonies. It's crazy.
I've really been diving in, especially over the past couple months, not only just conversations that I'm having with myself, but, you know, opening up on the podcast a little bit as well. I've been diving into some mental health aspects of things because, you know, I'm feeling a lot better over the past month or so. But, you know, a month ago, I had a month stretch where I just wasn't feeling like myself. I was second guessing everything that I was doing. I felt constant pressure, anxiety, almost a little bit of like depression setting in, and I just really was in a rut that I just could not get out of. So I figured, heck, I'll just do a 20-minute podcast and talk about it. And obviously before I did that, I talked to my wife, and then I talked to a good friend. And by putting that podcast out, I had a bunch of people, guys that I don't even know, just reaching out to me and expressing the fact that, hey, you know, it's all right to be feeling down. It's okay to not be okay, like you said. And just spreading that message of, hey, people are going to have their down seasons. You know, they're going to have their seasons where they're crushing it, which is probably the majority of the stuff that you're going to see on the internet. But, you know, going back to what you said, on the outside, everybody was like, well, Chris Hamm's living a great life. But if you weren't to open up about it, they wouldn't have known that all the trials and tribulations and the problems that you were having as well. So, you know, it's okay to not be okay, and find somebody that you can share your story with, because there's no good in having all this information on something or having the answer to a problem and keeping that to yourself. All the information is no good if you don't share it with anybody. And we have an opportunity to do that, and we're going to continue doing that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, not being a service member, I think my story and my transparency and sharing it has maybe helped me bond with that group a little bit more, because yes, I do have my own scars. I mean, I think of a guy that I had on the podcast about 1.5 years ago, Will Jimeno, who was a Port Authority police officer that had the Twin Towers collapse on him. Powerful, powerful story. He wrote an amazing book about the whole experience, and he was actually an archer before 9/11 happened, and now uses archery to help combat his post-traumatic stress, and just get him in a good headspace. But one thing that he told me that I took away from the conversation is that regardless of what your profession, what walk of life you're from, what kind of life you've lived, everybody is going to have their 9/11 at some point. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. And he basically said, you know, you can't compare traumas. I mean, somebody might have been in a police shooting. You know, you've got active duty and veterans that have had to do stuff for our country that is going to haunt them for years, if not their entire lifetime. I don't have those experiences, but I had a divorce that I went through, and then some self-induced trauma from my alcohol addiction. I just poured gas on a fire. But being able to step back from that, come out the other side, and then honestly analyze it and use that story to help somebody else. I've had multiple conversations over the last half dozen years since I've started, you know, interfacing more with the veteran and the first responder community about people that were in that dark place. I don't name names on here. I don't have those conversations on screen or on a podcast, but that has happened, and God is using me and my story to minister and to help other people. And that there's power in that. And that's why I continue to do the work that I do, and why I have a podcast. Yeah, I don't get hundreds of thousands of downloads, but like you said, if it touches one person and it changes one person's life, it's all worth it.
It is, and it's cool because we started our podcast roughly around the same time. I believe it was 21. I think you started yours in the summer of 21.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was late April, early May of 21. So.
Yep, and I started mine October of 21. So we've been able to kind of go on that journey together, which has been fun. But I'd like to get into, you do a lot of work for not only your community but surrounding communities around the world, basically. Let's talk a little bit about HHA. The listeners are familiar with HHA USA, just via some stuff that I've done for y'all. But go into that, where that came about, and I mean, it's my favorite nonprofit going, man. So I'd like you to share a little bit more about it so people can get a better understanding.
Yeah, and I just want to bookend or to end our last conversation, talking about mental health with running a business, with running a nonprofit. It was a busy year, and last fall, I took off, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks from my podcast. I did the same thing going into this year, not really knowing when I was coming back. I knew I was going to, but I needed a break. And it was ironic. I don't believe in coincidence, but at church we were going through a series on it was called Distracted, but it was about getting off of social media, getting off your phones, and just having some quiet time and just kind of unplugging from the world. So that we're going through that series right at when HHA USA fundraising season comes to an end. It's like, okay, I'm going to unplug from the podcast.
Yes,
I'm going to take a break from social, and it's been really, really good to do that. It's probably, I just put a post out on my own page a couple of days ago. It's probably one of the best things that I've done. And for as chaotic and stressful as this year has been, I really needed this reset. And I knew that at what point, I knew God was going to call me back to the podcast at some point. And I guess I can throw a little teaser out on here, but my good friend Aaron Ritter just had his first successful grant amputee archery hunt down in Texas, and his recipient killed just a beautiful whitetail down there. I had a great conversation with Aaron last week. He's still on cloud nine about the success of that. So that's going to be my re-entrance into the podcast world here probably in the next 2 to 4 weeks. I'm going to do a 3-part series, one with Aaron, one with Christopher Dunlap, who is a veteran and was the guide down there, and then one with Chris Norton, who was the recipient and the guy that was able to put that awesome whitetail on the ground. So it's just cool how stepping away from something even that we're passionate about for a little while, how much clarity it gives us. And it just, I feel more focused and just more at peace than I've been probably in a better part of a year right now. And I just wanted to share that with your listeners too, because it's important to do that and step back once in a while just to take a deep breath and, turn off the phone. Don't worry about the Post-it notes. They're going to be there when you turn them back on.
You're the second person in my life that's said this to me in about the past 3 days, so I might have to pick a bone with you off air, because my wife is being like, you should take a little bit of a break from the podcast. You've done it 100 and some odd weeks in a row. You're focused on a few different things. It'd probably be nice to give it a little break, and it's going to be there when you get back. So I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I might pick your brain a little bit further, because it doesn't sound half bad. I feel like it could benefit what I have going on.
I'm here to be picked, and I this is my second year doing it now, and last year wasn't quite as stressful. It was very refreshing for me to do it. This year I absolutely needed to do it, and I'm so glad that I did. And it's like, yeah, I feel lighter.
Yeah, I want to pick that bone with you, I think, maybe off air.
Yeah.
I might end up doing that. But transitioning into HHA USA, give me a little bit of background on the nonprofit. Of course, I know majority of the beginning, middle, and current status of it, but I just want everybody to be familiar with it, because obviously it benefits my former community, a community that I was a part of, which I really enjoyed. But I've played a couple small pieces in that as well, which I think we're going to do again at some point. But tell us a little bit about the work that you do for veterans and first responders.
Yeah, so I started HHA USA 4 years ago. It was August of 2019. And basically it's, uniting service members in archery. It started out primarily with active duty and military, but now we also work with firefighters, law enforcement, first responders. And the catalyst for that whole thing was actually the honor flight. So for your listeners that aren't familiar with honor flight, there's about 130 chapters around the country. They're a national nonprofit, and they send veterans of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam to Washington, D.C. for a one-day, all-expenses-paid trip to visit all the war memorials. So they go to the World War II Korean War Memorial, Vietnam Wall, the 9/11 Memorial. It's just a powerful, powerful trip. And so it was back in 2016, 2015 or 2016, I started as a ground volunteer for our local chapter. And being a business owner, being one of the guys in charge, it was nice for just a day or a weekend to be a grunt and to be one of 150 or 200 people that it took to pull off this amazing event for these very deserving veterans and not be in charge. It's like, hey, what can I do? Well, you can come to the church and you can set tables. You can put napkins in place settings out, or you can go to the airport and you can make sure that people get across the crosswalk without getting hit by a car. It's like, sign me up. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then I was driving home from the airport one night. It was about 10:30 or 11 o'clock after the flight had gotten home. And I thought, man, I have had so much success on the for-profit side with HHA Sports. How can I leverage that to raise money for this cause that I love so much? And ironically, that morning I had met a gentleman that was another volunteer that was a board member for the local archery club where the flight took off. And then we have an archery club in town, and then I also hit up one of our local dealers that had done a cancer benefit for one of his customers earlier that summer. I figured, well, that guy's got a heart for causes. Maybe he'll help us out. So 2017, I put on 3 archery shoots in central Wisconsin, and I just hit up all of my industry friends, whether it be Matthews, Lacrosse, Danner Boots, you name it. Everybody that I had selfishly gotten stuff for myself for over the years. I said, hey, we're going to put on some fundraisers for Honor Flight. Would you consider sending some gear? And the stuff just started flowing in. And so in 3 years' time, we put on, it was either 10 or 11 archery events in central Wisconsin, and we raised just under $90,000 for our local Honor Flight.
Wow.
But then the more entrenched in that community that I got, I also got introduced to the Department of Defense Warrior Games back in 2016. Everything was kind of happening at once. It was really cool how God worked this out. Because I was coming to faith. I get involved with the Honor Flight. Department of Defense Warrior Games happens. And for people that don't know about that, it's basically an Olympics for, it's adaptive sports Olympics for injured veterans and active duty to, get them back into a team setting. Some of it's individual competitions, but they do cycling, they do wheelchair basketball, seated volleyball, track and field, and they also do archery. And so a guy that was on our staff at the time, U.S. Army, he had won, I think one year he took silver, and then he won gold the following year in the archery competition. And he literally, last minute, 3 weeks before, emails me. He's like, hey, I'm coaching the Warrior Games this year. Would you be interested in coming out to West Point, New York to check it out? Okay, we can make that happen. So fly out there. And my only disappointment was the lack of attendance at it. You would think an event like that would just be packed to the ceiling with people, but it was basically just family and a handful of friends. But I will never forget sitting in the gymnasium out in West Point watching this gentleman shoot a bow and arrow. He had been blown up by an IED. His face was completely unrecognizable, and he had no fingers. And the guy was shooting a bow and arrow at 20 meters better than I could on my best day. And I get chills every time I tell the story, because I remember saying to the guys in the stands, I'm like, first of all, I'm never again going to say that I'm having a bad day. And number 2, I have to do something about this. And so that was really where God really gave me the heart for the veteran, the first responder community that has gone through these traumas, and just seeing the benefit of putting a bow and arrow in their hands. I mean, it was life-changing, and in some cases, like a guy like David Wooten, it was life-saving for him.
Yes.
And I don't want to say that I ever got tired of the sport of archery, but especially during my divorce. I mean, I think that fall I only hunted 5 or 6 times, and it was like I kind of took archery for granted after a while, and this just totally flipped it on its head for me. It's like, here's the sport that you loved at one point. You're still doing it, but look at the benefit that this can have to this community of people. You can literally save people's lives with a bow and arrow, and that's not an overstatement. And so that really was the catalyst that formed HHA USA. We raised a bunch of money for Honor Flight. In fact, next week from today, we have a flight going out of central Wisconsin, that flight that I volunteered for. It's $70,000 to send a full flight. And that was my first goal when we incorporated our nonprofit, was to fund a full flight. It took us 3 years to do it, but next Monday, October 16th, we're going to have a full flight going out of central Wisconsin to D.C. because of the fundraising efforts of our group.
What a story. Just unbelievable, man. And isn't it cool how you kind of just humbled yourself and you mentioned you wanted to be a grunt at this event and just basically do whatever type of work was needed with no hidden agendas. You just wanted to be a small piece of this big puzzle. And then you ended up seeing this guy shooting a bow with no fingers, and that guy, without seeing him, you might not be where you are today by seeing what he was able to do and having that hit. So that timing and just everything, just God planned the whole thing out for you, and you just took it and ran with it. It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's why there are no such thing in my eyes as a coincidence. There was a reason that I was there on that day and saw that. Because, I mean, there has been, and I take no credit for this, but I mean, I can give you 3 or 4 people that have come into my life as a result of HHA USA that are now doing their own thing. So, I mean, that just, I can't overstate enough, just be intentional about what you do, and don't think that even the smallest action cannot have a huge ripple effect. I think of throwing a pebble into the ocean. People might think, well, that's not going to do anything. Well, yeah, it really is, because if you don't throw the rock, nothing's ever going to happen, right?
Yeah, especially if you throw that rock every single day. Those days add up.
Yeah, it's hands down. I mean, we've accomplished some great things through HHA Sports, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But the work that God has chosen to do through me, through HHA USA, is hands down the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my life. I mean, it's just so cool to go to these shoots and see these friendships form and see the smiles on people's faces, and just know how much those weekends mean. I mean, I don't know how many times I go to these events and they're like, man, you have no idea how much I needed this weekend. And it's like, I don't want any credit for that, but it's just, that's being the hands and feet of Jesus and just loving on people with no agenda whatsoever, other than just to serve people.
And you're doing the things for all the right reasons too. None of these things benefit you financially or anything like that. You're doing this out of the goodness of your heart to simply help people that have allowed people like you and I to do what we're doing now. All these people that have fought for this country and fought for us. That's the reason we're sitting, here at middle of the day on a Monday doing a podcast. Without these people that served and fought for our country, it might not look how it does today without those people. So any bit that you can give back, and to have one of these veterans come up to you after an event and be like, you have no idea how much I needed this weekend. I mean, that has to mean everything to you. Everything.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, there's other conversations that I probably won't share on here, but I mean, just living with that, living life with open hands, and just being willing to give everything away and not want anything in return. You don't know the effect that that's going to have. And I'm not naive enough to think that, some of this stuff I'm never going to hear about. There's people that have been impacted by listening to our podcast or coming to one of our events that are never going to say anything, but their lives are going to be changed. And that's fine, because when the good Lord calls me home, he's going to sit me down and go, oh yeah, do you remember that shoot back in July of 2021 and that guy that showed up that you talked to for 30 seconds? Yeah, his life was going this way, and because of that, it went this way. I mean, it just that blows my mind.
Yeah, you can't replicate that. I mean, that's above all the best possible outcome. And it's, it's always cool to hear about, hey, I helped this person or this person reached out. But like you said, imagine all the people that are benefiting from, hearing your story or coming to a shoot or getting on that honor flight that you don't even meet and or talk to. There's so many lives that, not only you, but me and people around the world that are changing lives that don't even see any type of recognition or get any type of feedback. So even if you aren't getting that type of feedback, just know that there are people out there that are listening, are following, are hearing what you're saying, agreeing with your message, and you are helping a lot of folks, man. So it's just wonderful work that you've been able to do. And, as you know, I'll do anything to help support your cause.
No, and we appreciate everything that you've done, and I hope hopefully we can get you out to Wisconsin next year, because we got some really, really cool stuff in store for 2024 that we'll be pulling the lid off here in the next 30 to 60 days, and would love to have you be a part of it, because just with your heart for that community, knowing what you've gone through, I guarantee if you can make it out to Wisconsin next April for our big private event at Vortex, there's going to be some good stuff coming out of there for you that will benefit you just from a mental health aspect, and just new friendships to be cultivated there as well.
Yeah, be an honor to make it. I'd love to do that.
Chris, well, you're on the invite list, dude. So
perfect. This has been a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before I get you out of here, man? I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, no. One other thing that came to mind when I talked about that magazine cover that I totally despise. So fast forward to 2020, every year at the HHA show, they have a prayer breakfast that's like 6:30 to 8:15 before the show kicks off on the second day, and I was asked to share my testimony there. And I don't want to say I was nervous about it, but I mean, that was 4 years ago. I wasn't quite as comfortable in my new skin with my faith maybe as I am now, but I was still very excited to do it. And they wanted a picture of me to put on the screen while I was speaking. And so my mind instantly went to that photo, because it's like, yeah, I didn't like that version of myself, but there's a story there. So like I said, I had thrown away all the copies, so I couldn't even scan one in. So I contacted Archery Business, and they went back in the archives and grabbed it and sent it to me. So we were able to have it on the stage. But and I don't know what photo you're going to use of me for introducing the podcast, but I'd like to send you the picture of me and Houdini, the big buck that I killed last year.
Whatever one you want, brother.
And it's so cool how God works. So back in 2018, I had a 2.5-year-old buck on my farm. He was a mainframe 10 with stickers on his G2, so he was a 12-pointer with a lot of good genetics and great potential. Well, fast forward to 2019, I had a big 10 that showed up that kicked him off the farm. I ended up shooting that buck during rifle season because I couldn't get him close enough with the bow. He scored 153. He was my best whitetail to date at that point. Fast forward to June of 2020, this 12-point shows back up, now as a 4-year-old, much more mature deer. And I always thought it was stupid when guys would nickname their deer. I'm like, who does that?
People with a lot of acres and no hunting pressure.
Exactly. And I never had that ability to do that up until a few years ago. I've got a 160-acre farm. Well, now I've got this buck that I've got some history with. And it's like, well, he disappeared for a year and he came back. I'm going to call him Houdini. So long story short, it took me 3 years to kill that deer. And when I got him, I'm a life member of the Christian Bow Hunters of America. They're based out of New York, and I'm pretty good friends with the editor. They're always looking for content. They're always looking for stories. And so he was one of the first guys I called after I got Houdini. I'm like, Merle, I think I have a story for you. And I had missed that deer in January of 2022. I shot right underneath him at 40 yards. And it's like, man, 3 years of chasing or 2 years of chasing, and then this. It's like, is this really the end of the story? So I actually prayed before I got out of my blind. I just said, Lord, if it is your will and you want me to shoot this deer, I said, you are going to get all the glory for it. It was just this short and sweet prayer. And right after I said that, he put 4 words on my heart, and it made no sense, but it was practice, perseverance, preparation, and patience. They all started with the P. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. It's like, where does that come from? And being a Post-it note guy, after it was like March, and those 4 words kept coming back: patience, practice, perseverance, preparation. So I wrote them down on a Post-it note and hung them on my computer. Well, I can tell you those 4 words played a huge part in me finally getting that deer. Practicing, persevering, preparing, being patient. And so when I killed that buck, I wrote a 2,500-word story for Christian Bow Hunters of America, shipped it off to them, and they put that buck on the cover.
Man, I remember seeing that. I'm gonna have to read that article.
I will. I'll email it to you. And they
Please.
sent me a couple hundred copies of that. They're all gone. I gave them all away. I don't have any more, and it's like, dang it! I should have at least saved one for myself. But talk about coming full circle. I mean, I would have to look at the dates on the magazines, but it was almost like 10 years apart. Where here I am on the cover of this magazine, out, selfishly promoting my own kingdom. Hated the picture. 10 years later, biggest buck of my life. He scored 169 and change. I didn't even know I was going to be on the cover. One of my buddies out east, my wife and I were shopping on New Year's Eve, and all of a sudden I get this text. He's like, "Hey, look what showed up in my mailbox today." And I'm like, "Hey, that's the new CBA magazine." I didn't know I was going to be on the cover.
Yeah, I know that guy.
And I don't have a big head about it, but how cool that when we work for God's kingdom, look at the rewards that he gives us. I mean, you talk about planting seeds. I mean, I gave a lot of those magazines away to people that were Christ followers, that are Christians, but I guarantee probably half of them went to people that weren't.
Yes.
And so God used that deer. Maybe the sole reason for me shooting that deer was to bring one guy to Christ. Mind blowing.
Can't make this up, Chris.
You can't.
You can't make this up, brother. God works in mysterious ways, and all you have to do is listen.
Which is hard, because when we're dang busy and have our noses pressed into our smartphones, it's pretty hard to listen. So put your phone down and get out in the woods or take a walk and just be quiet and be still and see what happens. I think you'll be really, really pleasantly surprised with what you hear.
It's a huge honor to have you on the show, Chris. I always knew I was going to do this. I was just kind of waiting for the right time, and it's only right that you come on over here after I've been on the HHA podcast. I think for a record-setting third time, I think I still hold the title for that. I might be tied right now, but I'm holding the title at 3 times. So if anybody wants to come and take it, you're going to have to talk to Chris.
No, I plan on having you on for a 4th after you come out the Vortex next year. So.
And I appreciate you sharing your testimony on this podcast. Like I told you, I knew a bit of it. I don't think I've ever heard it in its entirety like today, but I appreciate you telling me that, and I know it's going to help somebody. And like we've said, that's what we're about, and that's what we're going to continue to do. So thank you very much, man. If you don't mind, stay on the line. I'd like to small talk with you a little bit, but before I get you out of here, can you just tell everybody where they can find you, and if they're looking for a new site, where they can go to get one?
Yeah, so anybody that wants to find me personally, I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. It's Chris Hamm 2517, and that comes from 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says that anybody that is in Christ is a new creation. So Chris Hamm 2517. You can also follow HHA USA, my veterans and first responders nonprofit, on Instagram and Facebook. And then if you're looking for archery sites and any kind of swag, stuff like that, HHAsports.com is our website. And we're on all the socials as well as our YouTube channel. So, and I guess the last thing I would throw out, we don't have a YouTube channel for HHA USA, but there's about a half dozen short films that we've put out under the HHA USA umbrella that tell stories of guys that have now become close friends of mine that were in law enforcement, in the military, that have post-traumatic stress, and they're having conversations like this, like you and I are having today, and sharing those struggles to try to help other people. So I would strongly recommend that you go and check those out too. We got some new ones coming out here late fall or early next year. So
the films are very powerful. I agree. I've seen, I think, all of them, at least the ones that are currently released. So please head over to YouTube and check those out. I'll leave a link in the podcast bio for probably my favorite film. The one with David Wooten was really good. The other one with, I think, Chad Stillman, is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah, that one was also one of my favorites. So very good. Man, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it. I can't tell you how much.
No, I appreciate you coming on, and just thank you for the work that you're doing, because you're changing lives one podcast at a time, man. So keep it up, and maybe think about taking that break.
I hear that. I appreciate you, man.
Your wife's a smart woman.
Yeah, she's downstairs somewhere. I'll tell her you said that. She'll agree. All right, brother.
Good, man.
I'll check you out. Stay on the line.
You bet.